This week on What in the World is Going On, 129 nations ignore Jewish ties to the Temple Mount, calling it solely Muslim. That's the headline. We've got lots to talk about, so stay tuned, friends. We at the Friends of Israel Gospel Ministry reported that to you on December 2nd, informing you that the United Nations General Assembly approved a resolution of 129 to 11 votes on Wednesday, December 1st, that disavowed Jewish ties to the Temple Mount and called it solely by its Muslim name, Al-Haram al-Sharif. We further went on to report to you that the text referred to as the Jerusalem Resolution is part of a push by the Palestinian Authority and the Arab states across the UN system to rebrand Judaism's most holy site as an exclusively Islamic one. Seriously, friends, 129 nations are going along with that nonsense. What are they trying out for the part of the goat nations mentioned in Matthew chapter 25? It certainly looks that way, doesn't it? But seriously, friends, this isn't the first time the United Nations has spewed their anti-Semitic hatred for Israel. No, they continue to do so on a regular basis. And on May 2nd of 2017, UNESCO, that is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, they said something very similar, where they basically okayed a resolution denying Israeli claims to Israel, saying basically that Israel has no legal or historical ties to any part of Jerusalem. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. How could they say such stupid things in spite of all the archaeological evidence that exists before their very eyes? All the years of work done by Dr. Eilat Mazar and her grandfather, Professor Benjamin Mazar, along with others such as Dr. Randall Price, documenting all the archaeological evidence proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that the first two temples indeed stood on the Temple Mount. You know, friends, I'd like to just point out here some of their work here. This is a book by Dr. Eilat Mazar. It's called The Complete Guide to the Temple Mount Excavations, documenting that archaeological evidence. And then Dr. Randall Price and all the years of work that he's done on the Temple Mount. And here is the Rose Guide to the Temple. Friends, I would encourage you to get these resources, and I will put a link for them in the description below. But educate yourself on that, because the world is turning a blind eye, and unfortunately, the United Nations' eyes are blind and full of hatred as they continue to try to rewrite history. You know, and to make matters worse, November 26th of this year, Arab Party RAM's chairman Mansour Abbas, who, by the way, is part of Naftali Bennett's coalition government in Israel, this is what he said. He said, quote, "The Temple Mount belongs to Muslims only." How can that be? I mean, when the word Jerusalem, friends, isn't even mentioned once in the Quran, but yet it's mentioned over 800 times in the Bible. And furthermore, when Muslims pray on the Temple Mount, they don't even face Jerusalem. They face towards Mecca. Perhaps they all need to take a look at the work of Dr. Mazar and Randall Price, friends, or maybe even just reread what the Supreme Muslim Council wrote from 1922 to 1953 in a brief guide to the Temple Mount. And here in my hand is a reprinted copy of one from 1924, where this is what they said on page 4. They said that the site, speaking of the Temple Mount, they said the site is one of the oldest in the world. Its sanctity dates from the earliest, perhaps from prehistoric times. Its identity with the site of Solomon's temple, that's Israel's first temple, is beyond dispute. Beyond dispute, friends. That's what they wrote in their own writings. Maybe they ought to read that. Maybe the United Nations ought to read that. Maybe the world should read that. Or better yet, even take a look at all the archaeological evidence to support that there indeed was a Jewish presence on the Temple Mount and furthermore, in all of Jerusalem. You know, it's amazing that how ignorant they can be. And so there you have it, right from their own mouth. And so what changed? What changed? Well, I'll tell you what changed is that the God of this universe, true to his word, has been gathering his chosen people, the Jewish people, back to the land that he gave them as an everlasting possession. And the trouble is that Satan knows that, and he hates that, and he hates the Jewish people, and he hates Israel, and therefore Satan continues to try to thwart God's word and his plan in any way that Satan can. And why does he do that? because he's out to make God out to be a liar so that Satan himself can't be judged. And friends, that's the crux of the matter. And he's working overtime in the children of disobedience. And so the nations, really, friends, they ought to tremble as they treat God's land as though he doesn't exist. For this is what he says, and let me read this to you in God's word in 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 16. God says, and this is speaking of Solomon's temple, the first temple that stood on the Temple Mount. This is what God says. He's speaking on that place. He says, "For now I have chosen and sanctified this house, that my name may be there forever, and my eyes and my heart will be there perpetually," friends, perpetually. So watch out, world, because the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has his eyes fixed on that special place. And thus, he has his eyes fixed on you as you treat it with disrespect and disregard for him and his chosen people. And so until next time, friends, this has been What in the World is Going On with the Friends of Israel Gospel Ministry. Good night, everyone.